Hi guys, and I'm back with another video. I hope you all are having a great morning, evening, afternoon time. I'm doing great. Hope you are doing great. I want to do another story for you. I'm actually going to look at John Lennon. Now listen, John Lennon's life was so long and complicated, and I'm going to do it in bunches, year spans, because I'd be here all day trying to just tell you the backstory on John Lennon. Interesting as it is, but we are going to walk through the life of John Lennon. Now, John Lennon was born October 9th, 1940 in Liverpool, England, in the United Kingdom. And his family was a poor working class family. His mother was mostly a homemaker. His father was a merchant seaman, so that meant that he'd be home sometimes, but most of the time he would work out at sea. And when he was working out at sea, he would send checks home to John's mother, and John, who was born at that time in 1940, like I said. And so he was supporting them, although he was sailing. Then all of a sudden, John's father went missing. For about 6 months. No one heard anything from him. He didn't come home. He wasn't sending any checks. So during that time, John's mother ended up meeting another man, had a relationship with him, and got pregnant with this other man's baby. Now 6 months time pass and the father reappears. Obviously, there is a rift in the relationship. The mother, though, doesn't really want to get back with the father at this time because he's been gone so long. They haven't heard from him. He hasn't helped to support his family, and she's not interested. So the father and mother are having trouble. John's real father and mother are having trouble trying to figure out their situation. So much so that John's older sister by the name of Mimi would call social services on them to, try to help figure things out because John wasn't, getting the best care. At some point, John's mother gives John to Mimi to raise for a while. And Mimi does take pretty good care of him, as far as she can, being that she's very young. But then the mother turns around and she wants John back. Now, at this point, the father decides he doesn't even want to live with the family anymore, so he moves to a completely different location. Instead of the father going his way and the mother going her way, the mother decides to follow behind the father, and she moves out of town with John's father as well. Not necessarily together, but she moves when he moves. And she brings John along. At that point, the mother feels like John should stay with the father, and she'll go back to Liverpool. So she would leave John with the father, and as soon as she's getting ready to leave, John would start crying and acting up so badly that the mother would end up have to take him back with her. And this happens several times. Until finally, the mother asks his sister Mimi, could she just take him? And Mimi did take him. And that's who he stayed with for a major portion of his formative years, his sister. Although the mother did come and visit with him. The father, after the final time the mother and father separated and he went to go live with Mimi, he didn't talk to his father again for like 20 years. Now, let's jump ahead. This is from 1956 to 1966. At this point, John is really into music. His mother used to play soul music when she was growing up and some rock and roll. So he really had a fancy to that type of music. And he ended up joining a group called the Quarrymen. And he would do performances with them. And they were pretty good. They wanted to put another group together, though, a different group, one where John was going to lead up the group. And so he had, at this time, met Paul McCartney, and they had become friends. And this new group they put together included Paul McCartney, Paul had a friend, George Harrison, which he introduced to John, and John put him in the group. They had Pete Best, who was the original drummer for them. And then they also had a friend of John's, Stuart Sutcliffe, I think that's how that you pronounce his name. So then they were going to be the Beatles, even doing little local, performances in their town. And people liked them. They also picked up Brian Epstein, who was their manager from like 1962 to 1967. I think he passed away in 1967. Ultimately, though, Pete Best left the group and Stuart Sutcliffe left the group, and now enters Ringo Starr. And there you have the full-fledged Beatles. Now, from 1966 to 1977, they were the Beatles. They were very popular. They came over to the United States. I remember even being a little kid, and I must have been about 5 or 6 or something like that, and I wanted to see them so bad. I remember my mother said, okay, I could stay up. They were going to be on Ed Sullivan's show. Of course, everybody remembers Ed Sullivan's show. And I remember, oh my goodness, being so sleepy by the time that they finally came on television. Gosh, I think I stayed up for just a few minutes, and then, I had to go to bed because I could barely make it. And I think it was really like about 8 o'clock. But being a little kid, you went to bed pretty early. Anyways, during this stretch of time, they did a lot of touring, traveling. They made studio albums, and they also did some solo performing work amongst themselves. And it got to a point where they weren't having fun anymore. I think it's the pressure of fame and different management people in different people's ears, and that's what caused them to break up. They decided we just don't want to be the Beatles anymore. So in 1970, John left the group. In 1970 also, John was really battling with a drug situation. He had been married to his first wife, and just that marriage was problematic just because it was John that was gone all the time, similar to what his father did, because his wife was in England and he was in the States, and his drug and drinking had gotten out of control a lot. And during this time, he met another young lady by the name of Yoko Ono. This really bothered some of his members of the Beatles, former members. They just didn't really care for her. They thought that she was trying to control John and they were trying to change him too much. But the more they were trying to force John to sort of leave her be, the more he was clinging on to Yoko Ono. And then in March 20th, 1969, John and Yoko ended up getting married. And at this point, John has completely decided, I'm not doing the Beatles anymore. I'm going to go solo. Now, John and Yoko's marriage was fine for a while, and they really enjoyed each other. They really started, just being closer and spending a lot of time together, like almost where they were pushing all the friends out and just the two of them. And then at about 1973 to 1975, John had what he called the Lost Weekend. And during this time, John and Ono break up. Excuse me. John decides he wants to do his own thing again. He wants to be single. And so they spend about 18 months apart. And John leaves and goes to Los Angeles. And he leaves Yoko Ono in New York. Yoko Ono was the type of woman that was really secure in herself, still is. She really knew who she was, so she did not go chasing after him. She was like, okay, do you? And he did. He ended up going back to drinking extremely heavy. He went back to using drugs, messing around with different women. So much so it just got completely out of control because he was doing this night upon night upon night, flopping at this friend's house and that friend's house, and just losing himself in sort of the Hollywood lifestyle. And it wasn't long, like I said, about 18 months, when John got on the phone in Los Angeles one day and he called Yoko Ono and he begged her to please take me back. I need your help. I need your support. I love you. This is a big mistake. And they did go back. Not only did they go back, it almost made the relationship stronger. John started really cleaning up his act and really started to get into the spiritual aspect of himself with meditation, right eating, being clean of any substances whatsoever. And in fact, in the same day he's born, October 9th, but 1975 instead of 1940, they have Sean, their child, together. And it was something about this child that just changed John completely, because I guess, number one, they share the exact same birthday. And so it's almost like you have this twin soul, this twin flame, and he just felt so connected to this particular, his child, that he really cleaned his act up, and he took just complete time off from everything, okay? He spent about 5 years just being a parent to his child and being a support system for Yoko Ono. And he would write, okay? He wrote a lot of music. He wasn't doing anything with it because he chose not to, but he wrote a lot of music. And then he ended up deciding, you know what? I think I'm going to start trying music again. It ended up that the music he made was so great that he and Yoko, because she wrote some poetry for some of the music, they made Double Fantasy, that album. And it dropped in 1980, and it was a huge, successful album. Now let's skip ahead. Now it is December 8th, 1980, and it's about 5 p.m., and John was outside of the Dakota Apartments in Manhattan, in New York. And a young guy ran up to him, and he shoved the album and a pen in John's face, but not really saying anything. So John was like, well, do you want me to autograph this? What do you want me to do? And then John signed it. The guy didn't really say anything, but John autographed the album, and he did it was the Double Fantasy album. He did that for Mark Chapman. And he gave it back to him. And then John left that night, left the Dakota, and went to a recording session. He was going to record some more music because Double Fantasy was such a success that he still had more music he had written and wanted to start releasing that as well. He'd taken the 5-year hiatus. He was back energized. He was back refreshed. And he was really excited about really being back into doing his music again. Now it's still December 8th of 1980, and it's about 10:50 p.m. And John and Yoko Ono, they returned from their recording session to the Dakota apartment building. They exit the limo, and Yoko says that she saw off to the side this young man standing in the shadows, but she sort of saw them, but she didn't really worry about it because they were so used to walking out around New York and no one ever harassed them. People knew who John was. They didn't know Yoko so much, but they knew John, and he was always going out and about and getting food or going to, little cafes and coffees, and everybody let him live. So, they weren't, hounding him for anything. But like I said, they exited the limo. They walked into the Dakota Apartments. Now, if you see the Dakota Apartments, it has an arching entryway, a stone entryway, and a big Gothic type wrought iron gate. And they had walked through that gate. And as they walked through that gate, Mark ran up behind John, and he shot John. He shot him 2 times in the back and 2 times in the shoulder at very close range. John fell. Yoko screamed. She ran back. She jumped on top of him, almost like with Jackie Kennedy and JFK, protecting him. But he was already down. The police officer came pretty fast because they were just riding around in that area anyway. They did not feel like they had time enough to wait on an ambulance, so they ended up putting him in the backseat of their squad car, and they took him to the nearest hospital, which is the Roosevelt Hospital. They began trying to do surgery on him, but he had lost so much blood, and he was pronounced dead at 11 p.m. And that was actually on December 9th, the next night. No, I'm sorry, that was still December 8th. It was December 8th, 1980. He was pronounced dead. It was just 11 o'clock. Ultimately, Mark was captured right away. He wasn't necessarily in hiding. He, against his lawyer's wishes, he admitted to shooting John, and he was sentenced to second-degree murder, and he got 20 years to life. Now, he has made several attempts to, be paroled. He comes up for parole every 2 years, but as of yet, they have not released him, and they probably won't release him because he had some mental dysfunctions and things as well, and so he has not been released. Now, I wanted to take a look at what in the world happened. What happened? And so I took the time. I was looking at both John and Mark, and this was a really, really tricky one to look in them, because when I look at both their birthdays, the numerology aspect, the natal chart aspect, this should not have happened. Completely should not have happened. No one was destined in this point. There was no destiny in anyone's chart. Everyone had complete freedom. Both of their charts really were more peaceful type individuals than troublesome individuals. So I had to really just let my spirit walk and talk through me to see what in the world happened. 1980, that's the first thing that I looked at. 1980 was a number 9 year, and it was December. So that meant that Mark had his birthday, which was a Taurus, May birthday. John had his birthday, a Libra, in October. So everyone was in their number 9 year. However, a number 9 year is about endings and closures, things happening, you going away. Maybe you make a big move. Maybe you lose your job. Maybe you lose your relationship. You find people that you are trusting in or you believe in, and they betray you. So number 1, it was a number 9 year. Number 2, John gave an autograph to a young autograph seeker. He did that all the time. They say he had no problems giving autographs to people. So this just was another autograph. And he did. And he had faith and trust in this young man for the time that he was able to have an experience with him. And this guy betrayed him. John was Life Has a Life Path number 6, which if you listen to John's music post Beatles, you can really tell he does. A number 6 years, about someone we rely on. And he was heading up the Beatles to begin with. And he got those guys, Paul and George, Pete Best, Stewart, even Ringo, out of impoverished conditions. Most of these guys were middle to lower middle class individuals, and he helped to wrangle them up out of the poverty that they were born into. That's somebody we can depend on, right? That's someone's reliable and responsible, and that's who he always was. He carried the burdens for everybody. His first wife, he really loved her and cared for her. His first son, he really cared for him. It just that there was somebody else that came along, but he didn't just cut them off out of his life either. I'm sure his son kind of felt like that, but he really didn't. He tried to take care of both families, and that costs money. Interesting that John's personal year was a number 1 year. So John had just only been in that number 1 year for a short time. So that made sense to me too, because I could see that he was going to be he just came out of a number 9 year, an ending of things. It was a number 9 universal year, and he was going into a number 1 year. So he had a portal that he created for himself, that he could stay and do more music, or he could go, and he chose to go. That number 1 year is planting new seeds of new things that you want to happen, and he wanted to go. Paul had a rising in Sagittarius, and that's the energy that he gave off. He was very much, if you remember him talking, he was more like a lot of traveling, a lot of fun, freedom, kind of a smart alecky when he talked, very blunt, very straight. He could say things without even smiling, but they would be funny. It was just his way. He was a Libra sun. Libra suns are very intelligent individuals. Oftentimes people say they go back and forth, but they weigh their decisions. They're not confused. They're not lost in it. They want to make the best possible steps and the best possible decisions that's going to benefit themselves, but also benefit those that are around them. So they always are very careful and cautious. Doesn't mean they don't have a temper. That doesn't mean they don't have a temperament. That Libra sun also tells me something that sometimes I say it and you guys probably miss it, but men with Libra suns have a tendency to be a little unusual, a little quirky, a little bit a feminine essence. There's a lot of femininity in the Libra sign as it is, so they're more in touch with their emotional side. They're more they're able to kind of show that side of themselves. They're not caught up in trying to be macho like a Libra or something like that. I mean, a Leo. They're more, they have a more softer way of moving in the world. He had an Aquarius moon, so that tells me why someone, for example, like Yoko Ono would be interested in him. That just is, their mind is so open, their emotions are so open, and they love who they love. And that Aquarius moon says he was probably going to stay with her. He's been that's a fixed sign. But I don't see anything. He's got a Libra in Mars, which doesn't really speak that to someone with a big temper. He could get upset, of course, we all can. He may be more so willing to go along with things that he didn't necessarily want to do rather than deal with a lot of confrontation. But he has Taurus in Jupiter, which means that he wanted more and more. He liked things, material things, money, foods, drugs, alcohol, anything that was pleasurable. He just absolutely loved that. And so Yoko was a little more of a stabling influence on her. I didn't look at her because she didn't have anything to do with the situation whatsoever. His Saturn is in Taurus also, so that says that for him, he understood that life was about phases and step-by-steps and practicality and taking things slow. And by doing that and doing the way Saturn wanted you to do in a slow, methodic method, you would end up greater success. And if you look at his life, that is what he did. He started off as a young guy, being transferred between family members to join in a little band in England, to the Beatles, until his greatest fame when he was out on his own. And so that step by step by step by step, and he paced himself and he took himself. And when he got into his addictions, he removed himself from that. He knew that that was necessary. There's nothing here at all that says to me that he would attract what would have happened to him, other than a portal he made for himself. Now, when I look at Mark David Chapman, his birthday is May 10th, 1955. He was born in Fort Worth, Texas. His life path is an 8. And that's kind of interesting because 8s are like the architects, the builders, the directors. They like to be in charge. They like to call all the shots. They want people to do what they want people to do. And so if you have mental or emotional issues and you're someone who's directing, then my feeling is telling me that you would have wanted John to stay with his first wife. You'd have wanted John to stay with the Beatles. That's what you would have wanted, as Mark being the director, if that makes sense. He would have wanted him to do the things he wanted him to do. And he didn't. Okay. He was also in a personal year of number 6. So he had things to take care of, people had to be responsible to, or taking care of himself. He seemed like someone that you could depend on and trust. Like I said, this is a very difficult one. His rising is in Leo, and rising Leo says that actually he was warm and friendly and people liked him. On the ill-dignified, it says that he could be demanding and domineering and want to control everything and just be arrogant. His sun is in Taurus, so that's funny because John is a Jupiter in Taurus, a Saturn in Taurus, and Mark has his sun in Taurus. So there's a lot of Taurus in that, everybody wanting what they wanted, okay, and they wanted more and more of it. I do see that his Venus, Mark's Venus is in Aries, and that tells me that he would have been fun to be in a relationship with, passionate, fiery, hot, fun to be with, but also impulsive. So if he loved the Beatles and he loved John, then his behavior would have been his actions, because Aries is about actions. He would have done something impulsively. He's got a Mercury in Gemini, also speaks of impulsivity, but a Mercury in Gemini is a sign of the genius. So John knew what he was doing. That's the only thing I can surmise is Mark knew what he was doing. I keep saying John, but Mark knew what he was doing. And as a matter of fact, I keep saying that because that just almost reminds me that Mark Chapman, when they asked him why did he do that, he said, "Why did you kill John Lennon?" And he said, "I am John Lennon." So that speaks to his impulsivity, his obsession. That's what the word I'm looking for. He had an obsession with John, and he had an obsession the way John lived. He had an obsession with the fact that John didn't do the things that he wanted John to do. He has a Jupiter in Cancer, which ordinarily should be really good. That means that you would be more loving and more warm and more generous and helpful to people. But it also speaks of a great deal of emotions. Emotions ill-dignified if it's in the negative side. So he would have been highly emotional seeing John, so much so it would have felt like, I want to capture him. I want a piece of him. I want to own him. He had his Scorpio was in Saturn. So his emotions were super intense. He either loved you dearly or he hated you intensely. So here we have a guy that had mental emotional illness, a guy whose life path was that of the director. I'm the one running the show. A guy with super intense emotions for the people that he loved. Like at one time, I think he really absolutely loved the Beatles. And then he was intensely angry at the Beatles and especially John. Jupiter in Cancer says he wanted ambition, and he's overly emotional. So his ambition may have driven him to do that as well. Like, I can get my name out there. I can take care of people. People will know me, as well as being overly emotional with him. His Venus in Aries would have made him very impulsive. Just do it. Get out there and do it. But nothing really speaks to a true, where I can say to you, this is why. All I can see in my spirit was, here's John living his life. John had always lived a life of changes and going and coming. John was really meant to be famous. His birthday is October 9th, and 9 is where he would have been when he died. 9 in your birthday says that you are known forever. You're famous or infamous, and that is him. Famous. That with Mark, that 5 says he grew up in his birthday, May 10th. That 5 says he grew up very hard, very severe, a lot of punishments given to him, a lot of teasing, a lot of bullying have been done to him. They probably moved a lot. His own self experienced a certain amount of poverty. The 10 turns into a number 1, and that is, again, you've got a life path of 8. I'm the boss. The 10 in his birthday, which works its way to a 1 that says, I'm going to do what I want to do the way I want to do it. Yeah. So I see him obsessing over John. I see him with his South Node in Gemini, his North Node in Sagittarius, and he was in his South Node, once again, very impulsive and doing what he wanted to do. John's South Node was in Aries, so he was moving ahead in his path and his direction, and he opened a portal for himself, and he went through it. John did, and Mark was the tool, really, to make it happen. Mark is not well. Mentally and emotionally, I can see that he is not very well. He's almost feels like he's arrogant. He feels like he's better than other people. This gave him the fame that he wanted, taking someone's life that famous forever. But it also hurt him where he can't get out of jail. He's in prison. He's been in prison since 1980. We're now 2020. He's never getting out of there. Yeah. So, guys, that's what I see with John Lennon and Mark Chapman. This was a relationship that had the number 9 sitting on it. It had the 9, the endings and the closures. The number 8, I'm the boss. You're doing what I wanted you to do. The number 6 that says, I'm responsible for you. I'm going to take care of you. And it came to a bad conclusion. Boy, that was a tough one, guys. That was a really, really tough one. But thank you so much for listening. If you like the channel, let's build it up. Subscribe, share. Thumbs up and leave a comment. Tell me what you feel prompted John. I think John's obsession, his mental illness, his feeling like I'm the boss, his arrogance that he had going on, his desire for ambition, fame, his impulsiveness, and his super intense Saturn, Scorpio emotions. Have a great day.